The Ottoman Empire has long been shrouded in whispers, tales of shimmering domes and silken chambers where power and desire intertwined behind gilded doors. Tonight, we step into that forbidden world. This is not the story found in the official chronicles of sultans and wars. This is the story hidden behind the veils, the world of captive women, political intrigue, and the secret machinery of the harem. Welcome to the channel where we explore the hidden history of sex and power across civilizations. And in this episode we ask, what really happened to captive women in the Ottoman Empire? The image most people carry is that of the harem, a perfumed prison of hundreds of beautiful women waiting to please a single man. But that image, seductive as it is, was born from the fevered imaginations of Western travelers and diplomats who were never allowed beyond the outer courtyards. They filled their ignorance with fantasies, fountains of rosewater, eunuchs patrolling marble corridors, and women reclining on velvet couches, waiting for the sultan's call. In truth, the harem was not simply a palace of pleasure, it was a school, a court, and sometimes a battlefield. The women within its walls were not powerless. They were players in a dangerous game where beauty could crown a queen or seal a grave. Imagine the journey of one such woman, a girl of 15 captured during a border raid in the Balkans. Her village burns, her family disappears, and she is taken by Ottoman soldiers as part of the imperial levy. For her, the empire begins, not with gold, but with iron. She is transported to Constantinople, the capital of the world's most powerful empire, and brought through the massive gates of Topkapi Palace. There, under the watchful eyes of black eunuchs, castrated men who were both servants and guards, she is inspected, washed, renamed, and trained. Her old life is erased. Her new one begins under a single title, Otoluk, a maid-in-training of the Sultan's household. Inside, time moves differently. The harem is a labyrinth of gardens, courtyards, and corridors designed to protect the Sultan's family and isolate his women from the outside world. But it is also an engine of education. The young captives learn languages, music, dance, etiquette, and the art of conversation. They are taught to move with grace, to dress with elegance, and to hide their emotions behind faint smiles. Every gesture, every glance, every word can become a weapon or a key. Those who excel may rise to serve higher-ranking women, concubines, or even the Sultan's mother, the Valid Sultan, the most powerful woman in the empire. For many captives, the dream is to catch the Sultan's eye. But that dream is a dangerous one. If she is chosen, she might spend one night in his bed. And if she conceives a child, her fate changes forever. She becomes part of the royal bloodline, the mother of a possible heir. Yet if she fails to bear a son, or worse, if she displeases the Sultan, she may be cast aside into obscurity, or sent to the old palace, a shadowy exile for women who have fallen out of favor. In the world of the harem, love is never simple. Every affection is laced with politics. Some chronicles tell of sultans who visited their women rarely, leaving the harem in silence and longing. Others tell of rulers consumed by desire, who spent their nights in endless feasts of luxury. But the truth lies somewhere between power and rumor. Many of the sultan's relationships were dictated not by lust, but by dynastic strategy. Each child meant another potential successor and another potential threat. The women of the harem were both mothers and pawns in the empire's most delicate game, the succession struggle. From the outside, European visitors turned these realities into legends of depravity. One 17th-century diplomat claimed that women were executed for looking at the sultan's reflection in a mirror. Another traveler wrote of secret tunnels beneath the palace, where slaves were said to vanish into watery graves after a single night of pleasure. These tales spread across Europe, fueling both fascination and disgust. Painters in Venice and Paris filled canvases with nude odalisques, imagining what they had never seen. The harem became less a place than a symbol of Eastern excess, mystery, and sensual danger. And yet, beneath those fantasies lay a strange truth. In a world where most women had little agency, some of the captives of the Ottoman harem rose to extraordinary power. Take the story of Roxelana, born Alexandra Lisowska, a captive from Ruthenia, now Ukraine. She entered the harem as a slave and became the Sultan's legal wife, a scandalous act in Islamic royal custom. Her charm and wit captured the heart of Suleiman the Magnificent, and together they reshaped the empire. Roxelana maneuvered through court politics with ruthless intelligence, removing rivals, promoting allies, and even influencing imperial policy. Some chroniclers whispered that she used witchcraft. Others said she poisoned the Sultan's firstborn son to secure her own child's future. Whether truth or myth, Roxelana's rise terrified the empire's elite, proof that a woman, once enslaved, could become the empire's hidden ruler. Behind her, others followed. Mihrima Sultan, her daughter, became a powerful patron of architecture and diplomacy. Kösem Sultan, another former concubine, ruled as regent for her sons and grandsons, commanding armies and deciding the fate of viziers. For nearly a century, historians call this period the Sultanate of Women, when the empire's most powerful figures were not the men who wore the sword, but the women who held the Sultan's ear. Yet within the palace, the harem's internal life remained an enigma. The eunuchs, often from East Africa, served as both guards and confidants. They controlled the flow of messages, the selection of women, and even the fate of royal sons. Some rose to immense influence, bridging the world of the women with that of the Sultan's court. Their loyalty was absolute, but their power, terrifying. There are rumors that some eunuchs secretly smuggled love letters between captives and palace officials, or sold secrets to foreign ambassadors. Though such stories blend fact and fiction, legends grew darker in the retelling. Some claimed that the Sultan would send unwanted women to be drowned in the Bosphorus, their bodies wrapped in silk, and cast into the night waters. Others whispered of golden cages where jealous concubines were kept apart, forced to sing to mirrors of Mercury. While no records prove these tales, their persistence reveals the tension between fascination and fear that surrounded the harem. To outsiders, it was both paradise and prison, a place where women were adored and imprisoned in equal measure. But perhaps the greatest irony of all is that many captive women chose to stay. For them, life in the harem offered a strange form of security. Beyond the palace walls lay poverty, danger, and the constant threat of war. Inside they had education, comfort, and the possibility, however distant, of power. Some retired as wealthy patrons, building mosques and schools, their names carved into marble long after their stories were forgotten. Others faded quietly into the endless corridors, remembered only as part of the Sultan's 100 women. The deeper we look, the more the line between truth and legend blurs. The harem was never just about sex, it was about survival, politics, and the human hunger for influence in a world that sought to confine it. The captives of the Ottoman Empire were not merely victims of history, they were its secret authors. And this is only the beginning. In the next chapter, we'll step deeper inside those veiled walls, tracing how beauty, ambition, and fear became the empire's most dangerous weapons and how the women of the harem learned to wield them. As the golden sun of Constantinople sank behind the minarets, the harem came alive in its own twilight rhythm. What appeared still and silent from the outside was, within, a living organism, breathing, whispering, waiting. The women of the Sultan's household did not merely serve, they schemed, performed, observed. To survive, they had to master a language that spoke not through words, but through glances, gestures, and silence. The faint rustle of silk could carry meaning. A missed greeting could cost a life. At the center of this intricate world sat the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, the true power behind the gilded lattice. She was the matriarch, the enforcer of order, and sometimes the silent queen. Every captive woman's fate passed through her judgment. When a new concubine arrived, it was the Valide who determined her training, her prospects, and whether she might ever be presented to her son. The Valide's quarters were said to glow with gold and candlelight, but behind the walls her influence extended far beyond the palace. Ambassadors courted her favor, viziers feared her counsel, and foreign powers sent gifts, hoping to reach the Sultan through her whispers. Beneath her, the hierarchy was rigid but fluid, a system where fortune could change overnight. There were the Iqbals, favorites of the Sultan, the Khaddams, official consorts, and above them all, the Haseki Sultan, the chosen one. This title, first held by Roxelana, came to embody the impossible, a captive turned queen. The harem thus became a theater of ambition. For every woman who rose, another fell. Some used charm, others intellect, and a few simply luck. But in a world defined by men, these women learned that knowledge itself could be their greatest weapon. The harem's education was not limited to refinement. Behind the scenes, older women, those who had long since passed their youth, taught the newcomers the realities of survival. They spoke of the sultan's moods, the rituals of court life, and the fatal mistakes that had doomed others. One such woman, remembered only as Safiye Kalfa, was said to have kept a secret diary, later found and burned by palace officials. In it, according to later retellings, she described the harem as a sea of smiles, calm above and deadly beneath. Whether this diary ever existed is unknown, but its legend remains, a haunting echo of the invisible history written by women who could never speak publicly. Power and pleasure were two sides of the same coin. The Sultan's desire could elevate a woman to near divine status, or condemn her if that desire faded. But desire itself was never simple. The Sultan's choice was often guided by ceremony and suggestion. Certain nights after prayers and incense, the chief black eunuch, known as the Kızlar Asa, would approach with a folded silk cloth bearing the name of a chosen woman. How that name was chosen depended on more than beauty. Alliances, promises, and even secret payments could tip the balance. Once selected, the woman was bathed, perfumed, and adorned in garments embroidered with pearls. She would be led to the Sultan's private chamber, her fate sealed in silence. If she pleased him, she might remain favored for months or years. If she conceived a son, her life changed entirely. The birth of a prince meant a future of immense privilege but also of perpetual danger. The Ottoman system of succession had no fixed rule. Brothers could become rivals, and sons of different mothers often found themselves on opposite sides of deadly intrigues. Many a Valide Sultan's heart had been broken, or hardened, by the necessity of protecting her own blood at the expense of another Wayu. It was in this volatile climate that women like Kösem Sultan rose to mythic stature. Originally a Greek girl named Anastasia, Kösem entered the harem as a slave and rose to become regent of the empire. She ruled during the reigns of her sons Murad IV and Ibrahim III, and for a time, the empire bent to her will. She dispensed appointments, managed finances, and commanded loyalty that few men could rival. But her downfall was as dramatic as her rise. When her grandson Mehmed IV came to power, Kösem was accused of plotting to depose him. According to palace records, and the darker rumors that followed, she was strangled with a silken cord, the traditional Ottoman method of execution for the royal family. Some say her own servants betrayed her. Others whisper that she died in the same secret chamber where she had once orchestrated the empire's fate. Her death became the stuff of legend. Foreign envoys wrote of ghostly lights flickering in her abandoned quarters, of the scent of her perfume lingering long after her body was gone. These tales, whether imagined or inspired, reflected the uneasy awe with which the world regarded the women of the Ottoman harem, women who could wield power greater than generals, yet remain invisible in the annals of formal history. But it wasn't only within the palace walls that their influence reached. Many of these women became patrons of vast public works, mosques, fountains, hospitals, and schools, spreading their names across the empire. Mihrimah Sultan, the daughter of Roxelana, commissioned 2 grand mosques in Istanbul, each positioned, so that on her birthday the sun would set behind one and the moon rise over the other, a poetic alignment said to symbolize her name, sun and moon. These projects were more than vanity. They were declarations of presence in a world that denied women public identity. Through architecture, they wrote themselves into stone. European envoys, ever curious and ever imaginative, tried to decipher this hidden system. Some portrayed the harem as a prison of suffering, others as a paradise of indulgence. Reports varied wildly, depending on the teller. Venetian diplomats, forbidden from entering the harem, relied on gossip from eunuchs or court servants. French travelers embroidered their tales with sensual details to satisfy audiences back home. A few even claimed to have bribed their way into the women's quarters disguised as musicians or healers. One such traveler, Jean de Thévenot, wrote that the Sultan's women walked in jewels worth the ransom of kings, yet lived in suspicion so sharp it could cut the air. While his account is filled with exaggerations, it reveals the paradox that defined the harem in the Western imagination, a place of both immense luxury and unrelenting control. Among the most persistent rumors was that of secret punishments for disobedience. Tales spread of women drowned in weighted sacks, known as the café stories, though no verified record confirms such executions on a regular scale. The term cafés, in reality, referred to the cage, the secluded quarters where potential heirs were confined to prevent fratricide. Yet over time the legend twisted, and the idea of a literal cage became the symbol of the harem's supposed cruelty. It was easier for outsiders to believe in the exotic horror of imprisonment than to understand the intricate politics that governed the palace. Inside, life continued with rhythm and precision. The call to prayer divided the day, and the eunuchs maintained order with silent authority. The women rehearsed music and poetry, played chess and backgammon, embroidered silk tapestries depicting gardens they would never see. But beyond this cultivated grace was constant anxiety. Every whisper could carry to the valide's ears. Every alliance might crumble overnight. The corridors were lined not just with portraits and perfumed lamps, but with invisible histories. Friendships broken, favors betrayed, promises forgotten. And yet, within this tension, there were moments of strange tenderness. Older women often took younger captives under their wing, teaching them how to read, how to pray, how to navigate the labyrinth of power without losing themselves. Some found solace in writing poetry, anonymous verses that would later be discovered, copied, and shared among the palace staff. In these verses we find glimpses of longing, not for freedom, but for recognition. One fragment, preserved in a 17th century anthology, reads, "We are stars unseen by the night sky, burning behind walls of marble, our light known only to those who guard it." It is through such fragments that the humanity of these women emerges from the shadows. They were neither saints nor sirens, but individuals caught in a system that demanded performance and punished misstep. Their survival depended on reading moods as deftly as others read maps. By the late 16th and 17th centuries, the harem had evolved from a secluded sanctuary into a sophisticated political institution. Ambassadors sought to bribe eunuchs, who in turn carried whispers to the women closest to the sultan. Decisions about war, trade, and alliances could be influenced by a single conversation in the quiet hours of the night. It was said that a well-placed gift, a diamond ring, a Persian carpet, or a vial of rare musk, could travel from a foreign embassy to the sultan's bedchamber within days. These channels of influence were both admired and feared. To the Ottoman elite, the harem's growing involvement in politics was a sign of disorder. To the women within, it was survival refined into art. They learned to manipulate symbols, the gift of a flower, the placement of a lamp, the choice of a song, to send messages across the most guarded spaces. And through it all, the empire watched. Outside the palace, the common people speculated endlessly about the sultan's women. Poets praised their beauty, preachers warned against their decadence, and storytellers in coffee houses spun elaborate tales of love and betrayal behind the palace gates. For a people who would never see the harem, imagination filled the void. The line between truth and legend became not a boundary, but a bridge. As night fell over the Bosphorus, the palace would glow with 1,000 lanterns, their reflections dancing on the water. Somewhere within, a young woman, perhaps a captive from distant lands, would look toward that water and wonder which part of the city she might have called home, had fate not brought her here. In her reflection on the window pane, she might see not a prisoner, but a player in a vast game whose rules she was only beginning to learn. Because in the Ottoman harem, captivity was not the end of a story. It was the beginning of a transformation, sometimes into a queen, sometimes into a ghost, but always into something larger than herself. And as the empire grew, so too did the myths that surrounded it, each one blurring the line between history and imagination. As dawn broke over Topkapi, its marble courtyards gleamed cold and perfect. From a distance, it looked like paradise. But within those pale walls, the air carried secrets, the kind that could never be written, only whispered. For every woman who found favor, there were others whose stories dissolved into silence. The harem's beauty was a mask. Beneath its ordered serenity lay jealousy, surveillance, and a constant struggle for survival. Each woman's status depended on the sultan's gaze, but his gaze was fickle, and desire rarely lingered long in a palace filled with hundreds of rivals. The competition wasn't only for affection, it was for existence. A single mistake, an ill-chosen word, or even a rumor could end a life of privilege and begin one of quiet exile. The corridors of the women's quarters were narrow, their lamps burning soft amber in the night. Here, footsteps mattered. A servant's hurried pace could signal a secret summons. A eunuch's slow tread could mean punishment to come. Fear became a language, silent, shared, unspoken. It was during these tense nights that legends began to grow. One story told of a concubine who dared to write a love poem not for the sultan, but for a young janissary she had glimpsed from a window. When the poem was discovered, the girl was said to have vanished, her name erased from every register. Some claimed she was sent to the old palace. Others whispered she was locked in a marble chamber deep below the baths. There is no record of such punishment, but the legend persisted, passed from one generation of harem women to the next as a warning cloaked in myth. These stories served a purpose. They were the invisible rules of the harem, the code that taught obedience where fear could not. And yet, within that fear, bonds formed. Groups of women gathered in secret, bound by shared origins or faith. There were Circassian cliques, Greek alliances, and Slavic circles, each protecting their own. Sometimes these networks acted like miniature governments, collecting information, distributing favors, even manipulating eunuchs through small gifts or promises. It was politics in its purest form, survival distilled to strategy. At the center of this world stood the chief black eunuch, the Qizlar Ayasa. His was a strange power, at once intimate and immense. He controlled access to the sultan, the women, and the outside court. No letter, no gift, no whisper reached the sultan without passing through his hands. Some Qizlar Asu became so powerful that they rivaled the Grand Vizier himself. Their loyalty to the Valide Sultan was absolute, and yet their ambitions could quietly shape the empire's fate. Foreign envoys knew this well. European diplomats stationed in Constantinople often tried to buy their way into the harem's invisible network. They sent jewels, silks, and perfumes, not to the sultan, but to his mother or his favorites. Through them, they sought influence over trade routes, alliances, or peace negotiations. It was espionage wrapped in luxury. One Venetian ambassador wrote that a single pearl necklace could accomplish what a year of diplomacy could not. Of course, much of what reached Europe from these intrigues came distorted. The reports that made their way to Venice, London, and Paris described orgies and assassinations, poisonings and drownings, all exaggerated beyond recognition. The harem became a mirror for Europe's own fantasies, a place onto which the West projected its anxieties about gender, religion, and power. Painters like Ingres and Delacroix turned the imagined harem into an erotic dreamscape, filled with languid bodies and suggestive shadows. But for the women who truly lived there, reality was far colder and more calculated. Behind the sultan's private doors, pleasure was ritualized, almost bureaucratic. Bath attendants prepared scented waters and polished marble floors until they glowed. The women chosen to serve that evening waited in silence, veiled until the moment of summons. There was no romance, no candlelit seduction, only the machinery of dynasty. And yet, within those mechanical encounters, emotion sometimes slipped through. History records moments when sultans fell genuinely in love, defying custom to keep one woman by their side. Suleiman and Roxelana remain the most famous, but others followed. each love story reshaping court politics in unpredictable ways. Still, not all love stories ended in power. Some ended in madness. The reign of Sultan Ibrahim I, known later as Ibrahim the Mad, became one of the harem's darkest legends. It was said he was so consumed by suspicion that he had his entire harem of 280 women drowned in the Bosphorus after rumors of betrayal. Historians debate the truth of this tale. Contemporary accounts differ, and the story may well be an exaggeration born of political slander. But even as rumor, it left a permanent scar on the harem's mythos, a reminder that in a world where women's lives depended on one man's whim, safety was an illusion. Beneath these grand stories, daily life continued with quiet rigor. The harem's schedule followed the call to prayer. Lessons in language and religion filled the mornings, embroidery and music the afternoons. Younger girls learned the arts of conversation, storytelling, and discretion, the skills that could one day save them. There was laughter too, and friendship, and games of chance played with carved ivory pieces. Yet beneath every smile was calculation. A word too freely spoken could be repeated, twisted, and turned into a weapon. The palace was beautiful, but it was also an echo chamber of suspicion. It was in this atmosphere that the most subtle form of warfare emerged, the warfare of rumor. If a rival was gaining favor, whispers could undo her. Allegations of sorcery, secret meetings, or ill omens spread quickly, feeding on superstition. The Ottomans were deeply attuned to signs and portents. A broken mirror, a dream of water, or an unexpected illness could shift the balance of power. Some women learned to exploit this. They bribed palace astrologers or interpreters of dreams, ensuring that omens were read in their favor. In the empire's most sacred spaces, even superstition became a political tool. Among the most infamous of these intrigues is the story of Mapeker Kösem's successor, Turhan Sultan. After Kösem's death, Turhan ruled as valide sultan for her young son Mehmed IV. Her reign was marked by tension between reform and vengeance. Some say Turhan was haunted by Kösem's ghost. Others, that she visited the old woman's chambers each year on the anniversary of her death, leaving a single candle burning on the floor where Kösem had fallen. These are stories of memory and guilt, of women who carried the weight of an empire's sins on their shoulders. Outside the palace, the city pulsed with its own rhythm. The bazaars thrived, the call to prayer echoed across the Bosphorus, and the people gossiped about the invisible women who lived in luxury behind the palace gates. For them, the harem was a myth made flesh, a symbol of both power and mystery. Storytellers in the coffeehouses turned these women into legends. Witches who controlled the sultan through perfume, saints who prayed through the night to protect the empire, ghosts who wandered the palace gardens when the moon was full, and perhaps in a way, all of it was true, because the harem was not one thing but many. It was a sanctuary and a prison, a place of beauty and brutality, of learning and fear. It reflected the empire itself, magnificent and merciless. In the candlelit quiet of the night as the palace slept, some women would sneak to the latticed windows overlooking the city. They could hear the distant music of taverns, the laughter of sailors, the bells of passing ships. For a moment they were connected to the world beyond the walls, a world they would never touch again. And in those moments of stolen freedom, they were neither captives nor queens, but something far more human. Witnesses to history, unseen and unforgettable. The sun rises over the Bosphorus, casting golden light on the domes and minarets of Istanbul. Yet within the palace walls, time seems to move differently. The harem, a labyrinth of marble and shadow, continues its quiet rhythm. The lessons, the whispers, the calculated smiles. But as the empire evolved, so too did the role of the women who lived within its walls. Captivity was no longer simply about survival. It became a stage upon which strategy, influence, and legacy were enacted. Those who emerged from obscurity often shaped the empire in ways the outside world could scarcely comprehend. While the sultan held the official reins of power, it was the women of the harem who often nudged those reins in subtle but decisive ways. Through letters, gifts, and carefully chosen words, they influenced appointments, brokered alliances, and even dictated the fate of distant provinces. Some historians describe this period as the sultanate of women, when female figures exercised power equivalent to, and sometimes surpassing, the empire's most senior male officials. Yet for every story of ascension, there was a shadowy counterpoint. Life in the harem was precarious. Rivalries simmered behind every lattice screen. Alliances could crumble at a glance. A misplaced word or a misjudged gesture could mean banishment or worse. Legends grew to fill the gaps in documentation. One tale, circulating among European diplomats, claimed that a sultan's favorite concubine once orchestrated the slow poisoning of a rival's beloved cat to send a warning. Another suggested that women held clandestine meetings in the palace cisterns, plotting coups while eunuchs patrolled above. While the historical accuracy of these tales is dubious, they capture a truth about the harem's invisible rules. Survival often required cunning, secrecy, and sometimes ruthlessness. Amidst these intrigues, architecture became a canvas for power. Women like Roxelana and Kösem Sultan commissioned grand mosques, fountains, and schools, leaving their mark on the city and the empire. These projects were not simply acts of piety, they were statements of presence. In a society that often denied women formal recognition, the harem's inhabitants carved their influence into stone, ensuring their memory endured long after their deaths. Each dome, minaret, and courtyard became a testament to lives lived in the delicate balance between obedience and authority. The daily life of the harem was a mixture of rigorous routine and strategic performance. Early mornings began with prayers and lessons in language, history, and religious texts. Afternoons were filled with music, embroidery, and storytelling. Even leisure was infused with meaning. A game of chess could reveal alliances. A shared poem could signal trust. Older women acted as guides and mentors, passing down the unwritten rules of etiquette and strategy to the younger captives. In this way, the harem functioned as both school and battlefield, where intellect and charm could secure one's survival and elevate one's station. And yet, despite the constraints and dangers, there were moments of genuine humanity. Friendships blossomed, confidences were shared, and laughter echoed through hidden gardens and quiet corridors. Some women kept journals, composing poetry that expressed longing, grief, or hope, fragments of lives otherwise lost to history. One surviving piece reads, "Behind these walls of velvet and gold we live in shadows, yet dream in light. Our voices are whispers, our hearts are bold, and even in silence, we claim our right." These words remind us that, beyond political maneuvering and imperial spectacle, the women of the harem were human beings with dreams, fears, and resilience. The legends surrounding the harem have always fascinated outsiders. From Venetian ambassadors to French painters, the world projected fantasies of lust, cruelty, and excess onto these secluded women. Tales of golden cages, poisoned bathwater, and midnight executions became part of the popular imagination. While much of this was exaggerated, or outright imagined, it reflected the awe and anxiety the West felt toward a society in which women could wield secret influence. The harem became a symbol, simultaneously feared and idealized, of power and desire entwined. As centuries passed, the Ottoman harem's role shifted. Western reforms, internal upheavals, and modernization slowly transformed the palace and its women. The traditional structure of power within the harem diminished, but its legacy persisted. The stories of captives who rose to prominence, of alliances forged in silence, and of legacies etched into stone remained, echoing through history. Even today, Istanbul's mosques, fountains, and palaces bear witness to the lives of these women, their stories layered with myth, legend, and documented reality. Perhaps the most enduring truth is that the harem was not merely a place of confinement. It was a world unto itself, a hidden society where intelligence, strategy, and courage could elevate those once considered powerless. Captive women navigated a space defined by both danger and opportunity, where their choices, alliances, and talents could ripple through the empire. The harem's stories remind us that history is rarely straightforward. It is composed of voices that were silenced, whispered, or distorted, waiting to be rediscovered and understood. Today, as we reflect on the hidden world behind Topkapa's walls, we are confronted with both fascination and ambiguity. How much of what we imagine is true? How much is legend? What can we learn from women whose lives were constrained by circumstance but who nevertheless shaped history? These are questions without simple answers, but in exploring them, we honor the lives of those who navigated the delicate balance of captivity, ambition, and survival. And so, as our journey through the Ottoman harem comes to a close, consider the echoes that remain. The women of the empire were not merely adornments of history. They were strategists, patrons, and actors in a complex web of power. Their stories, woven from fact, rumor, and legend, continue to inspire curiosity and reflection. Which part of the harem's hidden history surprised you the most? Was it the subtle influence of a mother over an empire, the stories of ambition and rivalry whispered in shadowed corridors, or the legends that transformed reality into myth? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you want to explore more hidden histories of sex, power, and desire across the ages, make sure to subscribe and join us as we uncover the forgotten voices behind the grand narratives of the past, because in the end, history is never just about rulers and battles. It is about the people who lived, schemed, loved, and endured, often in places that the world could barely see. And the women of the Ottoman harem were among the most extraordinary of all.